DNA analysis is one of the most recent accomplishments in the forensics field. It has been used to exonerate innocent citizens for over 30 years in cooperation with the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project is an organization that strives to exonerate the innocents. Moreover, Antonio Beaver, that was charged with first-degree robbery, was exonerated after 10 years in prison on March 29, 2007. His story begins on August 15, 1996, when a victim is confronted by a man in a public parking lot. After a brief struggle, the perpetrator drives away in her car. The victim calls the police and describes the perp as a black man wearing a baseball cap with blood on his left arm. She also said that he was 5'10" with a gap between his teeth. On the next day, the police allowed the victim to draw a composite sketch of the attacker, and they recovered her car in St. Louis. The forensics experts collected latent fingerprints and swabs of the blood stain inside the driver's side door. 6 days later, a detective arrested Antonio Beaver because he thought Beaver resembled the composite sketch in this case. However, Beaver had a foam mustache, was 6'2", and had chipped teeth. The same detective then prepared a live lineup including Beaver and 3 other men. 2 of them were police officers. Beaver and the other non-officer were the only 2 to wear baseball caps, and Beaver was the only one with noticeable defects to his teeth. The victim, of course, identified Beaver. Beaver was charged with first-degree robbery and tried on April 1997. The victim confirmed and falsely testified that Beaver was the perpetrator who attacked her. Of course, the prosecution claimed that the victim's clear memory of the crime proves that her identification of the perp is highly accurate. The defense presented evidence showing that fingerprints collected from the victim's car, including prints from the driver's seat and the rearview mirror, that the person who left them must have driven the car. But none of that affected the jury's decision. After 2 days of arguing and contemplating, the jury convicted Beaver, and he was charged with 18 years in prison. Later, in 2001, Beaver asked for DNA testing. His motion was rejected. Although in 2005, the court allowed him a hearing, after the Innocence Project accepted Beaver's case, they filed another brief on his behalf in 2006. The state agreed to testing the blood swab from inside the car door in October 2006, and the results proved that Beaver was, in fact, innocent. The DNA results did not only exclude Beaver, but it allowed the police to catch the actual perpetrator, who was already suspected for other crimes. Beaver was exonerated on March 29, 2007. Beaver was 41 when he left prison. After serving more than a decade in prison, his life was wasted and ruined, just for a crime he didn't even do. Justice prevails, so they say. Now, of course you're wondering how Beaver's DNA was tested. Here's how. Now, there are 2 types of DNA testing, RFLP and STR. RFLP is the older one. It stands for Restriction Fragment Polymorphism. RFLP is a method used by molecular biologists and forensics analysts to follow a particular sequence of DNA as it passes on to other cells. RFLPs can be used in many different settings to accomplish different objectives. RFLPs can be used in paternity cases or criminal cases, or even to determine different things about diseases. This was also used such as some stuff in Beaver's case. The technique of DNA fingerprinting requires that the DNA be cut up into small fragments. This is done using restriction enzymes called endonuclease. After it's cut up and separated, a large number of short fragments of DNA will be produced. What restriction enzymes do is that they cut the same base sequence. And since no one has identical DNA as anyone else, the length of the fragments will never be identical. This is done through a process called gel electrophoresis. Gel electrophoresis is a process that is used to separate fragments of DNA and arrange them according to their size. They're placed on a sheet of gelatin, and an electric current is applied to the sheet. The smallest fragments will move the fastest because they are able to move through the pores in the gelatin faster. Bands will be produced on the gelatin where the fragments accumulate. The shortest fragments will accumulate near one end of the gelatin, and the longer, slower moving ones will remain near the other end. PCR techniques are used to create enough quantities of DNA for this technique. The steps of the process are as follows. First, you should remove the tape from the end of the gel trays as if it has not been used already. Then a plastic comb that was used to create the wells for the samples, you should carefully remove that comb. Then place the gel tray in the electrophoresis box. Add enough buffer solution so that the gel is completely submerged. Then load different DNA samples into the different wells. Before you connect the power supply, you need to place the lid on the box. Then you connect the box to the transformer and this transformer can be used to run two different gels. Then you switch on that transformer. Now, the gels should run for about 45 minutes. Each sample contains a marker dye that runs just ahead of the smallest DNA fragments. When the gels are finished running, switch off the power, disconnect the box, and remove the lid. Now you need to stain the gel so you can see it, and you do that by placing the blue staining sheet on a plastic staining tray with the stain side facing upward. Remove the plastic gel holder from the box and slide the gel onto a plastic staining tray. The gel should be directly on top of the staining paper. Ideally, the staining paper should remain on the gel at room temperature for at least 1 day. After the gel has been allowed to stain for at least 1 day, remove the staining paper. The gel should be ready to view by placing the tray on the light source. The other type of DNA analysis is STR, or short tandem repeats, which was used to exonerate Beaver. STRs are short sequences of DNA, normally of length 2 to 5 base pairs, that are repeated numerous times in a head-tail manner. The polymorphisms in STRs are due to a different number of copies of the repeat element that can occur in any person. STR is the more common and newly used way of analyzing DNA. That is because it has multiple advantages over RFLP. Like, they're shorter, they're easier to look at and analyze, and you don't need a lot of DNA to make an STR analysis, while in RFLP you need a lot of DNA. Now, after Beaver's DNA was analyzed using STR, his DNA was added to CODIS, or the Combined DNA Index System. This is the name used for the FBI's program of support for criminal justice DNA databases, as well as the software used to run these databases. This database includes all DNA of all convicted citizens and some of the citizens who volunteered to have their DNA added to CODIS. This is used to match the DNA found at any crime scenes to previously convicted felons. CODIS has been used to exonerate and prove many others guilty. Its success is remarkable. In this bittersweet story, after Beaver serves 10 years in prison, he can leave and go on with his life as if nothing happened. But some things are just never that easy to forget. Thank you. This was Ziad Hindawi on the Innocence Project.